Hello, this is Manic Insomniac, and welcome to another D&D audio log. After the last one, which I told you about my first experience as a DM, the one experience that have been so far, even though we are picking up this Sunday, I wanted to go into my actions and role as a player, I guess. Um, Even though I've only been playing about 2 years, much of those 2 years have been basically taken up almost entirely by this one campaign, which is played every Wednesday night. Um, and it's an AD&D campaign, first edition. There's a few house rules which change it up a little bit, but generally it's true to the original book, as far as I'm aware. Um, and miraculously, we still have two of the characters that started off from session one and have carried all the way through. Players have come and gone, and the group has changed over time, but two of us have been solidly there since almost the beginning. The third player is came in around about session 20, and the fourth player has been around, I think, for the last 6 months, maybe at least. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's integrated well into the group. So generally, we've got a good group rapport, even though it's only the four of us. It did start off as a six-player campaign, so you can imagine the amount of people that have come and gone over the time. I think there's been about 12 of us all in total, but each of the players have brought their own interesting views and playstyles to the group. Now, mine, I'm very much a story-driven person. I've told you about my ideas about writing novels and why I came to become a DM in the last audio log. And for me, that is always the main part of D&D. It's the role playing, the story. Like I don't think I would have continued with a campaign that didn't have as compelling story as the one our DM has presented with us. Like every single Wednesday night, I've missed very few sessions, and that has mostly been because of either work or illness, or and I think one birthday, just because of the way it fell. Um, but yeah, the story is very important to me. Like leveling up and loot and all that stuff is amazing. Don't get me wrong, I'm as loot as much as a loot or a nerdy hobo as any other D&D player, but for me it's always what is happening and what is going on. So to give you a bit of a backstory, the campaign we're playing is titled Graveyards of Empires, and it is set upon a tropical archipelago called Kurabel. And now these islands, in the past several thousand years, have been ruled once by dwarves and then by an emperor, an empire. But currently, it has gained its own rule and is basically looked over by a number of city-states. There's apart from that, I think it's fairly typical on the surface level to a lot of fantasy settings. You've got your elves, you've got your dwarves, you've got your men. Gnomes and halflings are rare, but most other civilizations are around in various forms. Um, I won't go into where it differs because I'll be here for hours. Suffice to say, dwarves were the almost precursor race, whereas often it is the elves that ruled the fantasy setting at one point and it fell into disrepair. In this place, it's very much been the dwarves. Dwarves are highly magical, or were highly magical, and now they're more atypical. But it's been a joy going through and finding out about the history of the race, especially since the two main characters, not main characters, sorry, two of the player characters that have lasted so long are both dwarven characters. The one is Thorfus Ironhand. He's played by one of my fellow players. He's a little bit older, a little bit more stout and gruff. I think he's become almost the de facto leader of the party, and he is, in backstory at least, a disgraced clan leader. And then there's my character, who I've played as a very young, very reckless dwarf, who came from a merchant background. Youngest son of a merchant. Didn't think he was going to get much in the way of party riches and family riches, and didn't want it so much. He looked for adventure, and that's why he ran off and joined this party. So we started off in one of the largest cities in the archipelago called Midmark. This is it's a massive port town, and much of our time to begin with was set up. We first cleared out a wizard's tower from these Magitech ancient dwarven constructs That was our first task, and then since then we'd mostly been running through this old dwarven town tomb beneath the sewers of the city's university, encountering all sorts of down there, goblins and bullywugs and more automatons and stuff like that. And by the time of about session 18, we'd also come into contact with representatives of the Dragon Empire, which was the last rulers of the archipelago. Um, they've been trying to worm their way back in and overthrow the local governments and basically pave the way for the Dragon Empire's return. And they do this by what they call the dervishes, which are imperial agents, very very powerful combatants. They've got a bit of magic and they have followers and all sorts of stuff. And we've basically been trying to track down one such dervish who had orchestrated the murder of the city mayor, uh, who had been killed by what we believe to be the mind-controlled body of one of the people we actually rescued from the sewers several sessions before. Now, in amongst our investigations, apparently we'd kicked the flicked the noses of a few people who were very, very dangerous, including this dervish. And this dervish had got his group together and he came after us. Now, this was very much our first encounter with an almost potential party wipe. Luckily enough, none of the party died, which was almost miraculous. They far outclassed us, and the dervish himself wasn't even present. It was just his followers. They laid a trap, they caught us, and were it not for the very clever actions of our illusionist, who went and fetched the city guard, we would have died. Now, part of the campaign has every session, one of the players will afterwards write up a session summary. Some of us go story-wise. We could have gone like bullet points or just a few notes here and there, but most of us write almost like a miniature story for each session, and the DM rewards with a little bit of extra experience. Now, where my love for storytelling comes in was, even though it wasn't my turn to write the session summary, I wanted to write some sort of summary because of the epic feel and almost hopelessness of the fight. Despite the fact none of us died, it was just one of those very cinematic moments for me. So I took the time to just write out the events of the fight. It was only like, I think, the last hour of the actual session, but it just inspired me that much. And it's something that very rarely comes up. Not for any fault of the DM, but for whatever reason, the current actions would inspire me to write something. And it's not like the inspiration hasn't caught me since. It's just I haven't had the chance or the muse to do so. But I just wanted to read this out, just because of how much. Just because I wanted to share this with everybody, because I've been going over old sessions just to help my inspiration on my own campaign. I figured I'd share it with you all. So, here we go. Axel sat sombre and quiet in the back of the wagon as the party made its way across town to Lord Thornton's. It had been a long day, wandering all over Newtown in search of answers, and the dwarf felt they had perhaps gained more problems than answers. The night grew dark, and the light rain fell upon them. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied. And the light rain fell upon them, souring his mood yet further. A commotion up ahead caught the party's attention, and they looked up as Minucius, their wagon driver, slowed his horse to a halt in the middle of a bridge. Looking over, they could see a carload of cabbages spilled across the road, a man and a woman arguing amongst the scattered vegetation. Tension spread throughout the group, and they all looked around warily out of pure instinct, even as an arrow landed amongst them from across the canal. Someone shouted ambush, and Axel moved instantly, rolling off the side of the wagon to the street, as the wizard Finkelmer dived for cover, Feldspar ready to spell, and Tarion drew his bow. The elf's keen eyes spotted the target, but its return shot missed its mark. Following his lead, Axel drew his own bow and nailed the archer with a powerful shot. Shouting begins, and the once arguing cabbage farmers turn and advance on them, drawing weapons. Finkelmer drove for cover behind the wagon, dragging Minucius along behind him, but is dismayed to see yet more attackers closing in from behind. Seeing Thorfus engage the two in front, Axel readies himself to join his dwarven brother, only to feel a surge of power splash against him. Whatever the magic wanted to do to him, the young dwarf resisted it, and he spun around to see the cleric step up alongside him. To see a cleric step up alongside the shocked-looking mage. The woman spoke a prayer, and once more the magic hit him, this one stifling and oppressive. He sees Tarion release another arrow and freeze up. Finkmore doing the same, even in the face of an advancing swordsman. With a defiant roar, Axel pushes through it and draws Face Cleaver, his battle axe, and tossing the bow aside. Realizing that the two magic users were perhaps the biggest threat to them, he charges, war cries issuing forth from his lips. Shouldering past the mage, he swings his axe at the cleric, reasoning that killing her would free his allies. But the cleric is surprisingly nimble, however, and the Face Cleaver sparks off a concealed vest of chainmail. Rage fuels him, and Axel presses the assault, but the mage snarls a word and is engulfed in a torrent of flame. Battle cries turn into a roar of pain, the flame heating up his mail, scorching his skin and hair and clothing. The dwarf rolled out of the fire, putting the cleric between him and the mage, renewing his assault. The woman meets his axe with a mace, and they dance back and forth, neither able to hit the other. Peripherally, Axel is aware of the rest of the party. The distant clatter of weapons beyond the wagon where Forfus fought, the heavy splash of Minucius diving into the canal, and the sickening, meaty impact of a sword impaling the frozen Finkelmore. He realizes that this is no mere assault by desperate bandits, and unlike the group devastated by Thorfus in the sewers, this group was made up of consummate fighters. As if to punctuate the fort, the cleric cried out, seizing an advantage to bring down her mace in a heavy blow that shattered his shield. The dwarf cries out in pain, his arm done by the attack. There is another splash. Someone else had jumped in the river, and a groan signals Thorfus falling to their attackers. We're going to die here, Axel realizes forlornly. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, their best warrior down and half the party unable to act. As if to assuage his fears, a chanted prayer echoes out, and he sees Aral, directing the holy energy at Finkelmer, healing the old mage of his wounds. The cleric leaps down from the wagon, racing to meet him and calling out encouragement. They fight together against the two ambushers. Passing over his shield, Aral heals Axel's wounds, and the dwarf surges forward with renewed vigor. A third attacker charges for the rain, skillfully ducking underneath the midnight star to deliver a fatal blow to the cleric. Crying out in rage and grief, Axel plants himself over his fallen friend's unconscious body and engages the three with desperation. For all his skill, however, the young dwarf was tired and hurt, fighting three humans alone. Eral's shield is wrenched from his arm, and the world goes black as the woman laughs triumphantly, striking his brow with her mace. And that's basically what I wrote. Excuse my reading skills, I get a bit tongue-tied sometimes. But you get the general idea of what the combat consisted of. I took a few liberties, so there's a few embellishments, but generally that is basically how the fight went. We were caught either side of a wagon. Our magic users were taken out very instantly by whole person spells, and basically I managed to roll through them. Dwarves are quite hard to pin down with magic in certain circumstances, simply just due to their bonus defense and stuff like that. But basically both of our fighters were stuck on opposite ends of the wagon fighting different groups. There was an archer across the river. Faltspar basically was out of spells, I think, at the time, or had a spell that wouldn't have helped. So he was the second one that jumped into the river following the wagon driver. And were it not for him doing that, and just in time fetching some city guard, we would have basically died there. My character was the last one standing over our cleric's body, but I was basically fighting a cleric, a mage, and a fighter over his body alone. And I think at the time we were like level 2, maybe approaching 3, but I think we were just level 2, and they were at least our level, if not higher. And this wasn't exactly our DM trying to kill us. This was our DM showing us that actions have consequences, and this is something he's done very, very well throughout the campaign. I recently tweeted about an almost death experience we had again, where in an old ancient dwarven facility they had traps. If you pass through this room with infected material, such as that by a zombie, the doors either side of the room close, and flame just obliterates everything within. It's basically like an airlock system. You go in, the door closes. If there's infected material, flames attack, and then you press the button and the door opens. So the zombies we were fighting were quite intelligent ones, and they knew they couldn't enter the room without dying. So they were fighting us from the doorway. Now, so we were fighting basically on our own terms, and we took a couple of them down. And one of the more clever undead picked up the body of one of his fallen allies and threw it at the button, hoping to cause the infected tissue to be in the room, the door to close, and us to just get obliterated. Now, he gave himself some hefty disadvantages to the throw. He basically had to crit it, I think. Maybe an 18 or something like that, which he didn't make. But we quickly rearranged our formation to protect the button, make sure that the bodies could be blocked if that could happen again. Had it succeeded, on the very unlikely chance it did, we would have lost the 3 highest level combatants in our party, the ones with the most knowledge, and the 2 oldest characters in the campaign. Would have been completely horrible, but it's just the way things happen sometimes, and our DM has always taught us, I think, to fight fairly smartly about things. I can give him a lot of props for that, but I think that'll do for today's audio log. I hope you enjoyed the little story there. If you want to know more about the campaign, I quite often tweet about it during sessions. We do a little bit of live tweeting when interesting stuff happens, so always check me out on Twitter. If you did like this video, just drop a like, and if you're not already, please subscribe. I'm trying to reach 100 subscribers, get my special URL, so that'd be fantastic if you could help me out, and you will see more D&D content very, very soon. But until next time, I've been Manic Insomniac. Good night.